Welcome back with us to the second episode of the Jerusalem model, showing Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. And this episode, we're going to be focusing on the last week of Jesus in the city of Jerusalem. I'm standing over here by these two olive trees once again, east of the city of Jerusalem, at the foot of the Mount of Olives, as if at the foot of the Mount of Olives. This spot over here would have been where the Garden of Gethsemane would be located. Right above us would have been the Mount of Olives. That's where we have the Palm Sunday, the route that Jesus would have walked on his triumphal entry coming into the city of Jerusalem. One thing which is very important. Jesus would never enter the city of Jerusalem till the last 2 days of his life. Yep, but we hear in the Gospels and earlier that Jesus came all the way to Jerusalem and went all the way to the Temple of Jerusalem. The Temple of Jerusalem and Jerusalem are two separate units. The purity regulations that applies to the temple don't apply to the city. And that's why usually we come and say it's totally two separate units. So throughout Jesus' ministry, from his childhood, we hear that he came into Jerusalem when he was 40 days old, and we hear about him coming with his family, with his parents when he was 12 years old. But along his ministry, the 3 years ministry, Jesus would have, or the center, the focus of his ministry would have been the Mount of Olives and the Temple of Jerusalem. So this will take us all the way to the last week of Jesus' ministry, which of course would culminate with his crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection. We're going to walk with him through Jerusalem, through or along that last week. To start with, it would be the Passover meal. According to tradition, that would have taken place on the top of Mount Zion, at the southern western part of Mount Zion, in what was known then as the Essenes Quarter. Jesus sent his disciples to Jerusalem to prepare for the Passover meal, and he told them go all the way down to the spring, which is known as the Siloam Spring, and there you'll find two men fetching water. That's an indication for people who are practicing celibacy, as usually women would be the one to fetch the water. They meet them, they go all the way, they prepare for the Passover meal. Before sunset, Jesus and his disciples would go into the city to eat the Passover meal. Which way they would go into the city? Well, the common way would have been is to come all the way to the water pool, the water gate, and from there to cross into the city. But that would have taken them passing the palace of Caipahas as well as that of Annas, and we know that already they've been searching for Jesus. The logic says they had to bypass it. So they went all the way through the Kidron Valley, that's where we are right now, and then up through Gehenna Valley, reaching the Essenes Gate. The moment they get to the gate, which by the way, we do have the remains of it within the Protestant cemetery up on Mount Zion, you enter the gate, and that's where we had some mikvahs, purification tubs, where they go on to purify their bodies at. In the Gospel of John, we hear that they went bathing in. Then they have ate their Passover meal. Judas leave them, as he was already plotting to surrender Jesus. Jesus takes the 11 disciples and he goes all the way through the Essenes Gate, back into Gehenna, across the Kidron Valley, to the foot of the Mount of Olives, to the place called Gethsemane. That's where he spent the night in prayer. That's where he was arrested at dawn, and from there he would be dragged all the way to the high priest's house. That's where he stood his judgment in front of the high priest. Today we have the place called St. Peter in Gallicantu, marking up Caiaphas' palace, that where Jesus' judgment would have took place. They could not reach a verdict over there. So they decided to take him all the way to the council house, which would have stood at the temple. Across the city, to the southern gates of the temple, the Huldah gates, underground passageway, takes him all the way into the courts of the Gentiles, and then all the way to the council house. That's where, by his word, saying, I am who I am, that is, I am the Son of the Living One, they said, well, blasphemy, he is ought to die. Nearby stood the Antonia fortress. Tradition says that's where Pontius Pilate was dwelling at. Well, there is a debate about it. This is not the spot right now to talk about it, but let's say that's where Jesus' judgment took place. That's where he stood in front of Pontius Pilate. Pilate did not really want to go on and sentence him to death, even though that contradicts up the character, the historical character that we know about Pontius Pilate. So he sent him across the city all the way to stand judgment in front of Herod Antipas, the governor of Galilee. Antipas mocked Jesus. He was not happy with Jesus' silence. He put on him a crimson robe and sent him back again to Pontius. That's where we go back to the Antonia, which is divided into two courts. The upper court, the residential area. The lower court, that's where the barracks, that's where the soldiers would be. That's where Jesus would have been flogged. That's where he was whipped. That's where he was crowned with a crown of thorns. That's where he would be handed his cross. And we can just imagine and see the stairway coming out of the Antonian fortress, taking us up the hill to the western hill once again, outside the walls, through the Ginat gate, to the place which is known as Golgotha or Calvary. And that's where Jesus was crucified at, and nearby it, that's where he was buried at, and that is the site which is today occupied by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Taking consideration that we have another spot which is known as the Garden Tomb. Now, historically, logically, archaeologically, it's definitely the Church of the Holy Sepulchre where the events took place. But the Garden Tomb is another spot which is worth visiting, a great place just to meditate and pray at. In both cases, the tomb is empty, but this is Jerusalem that witnessed the passion of God, the passion of Jesus.